So, we're going to talk now about meditation and mindfulness techniques. And I know a lot of you have had a lot of curiosity and interest in this. And some of you are already pretty far along in your own practice. Some of you are just getting started. And so, what we're really going to do right now is just walk through some kind of entry points into this whole area. And I'm going to share with you a number of techniques that I have used and played around with myself, and ultimately, my hope is that you will find something here that is an addition to your existing practice or a starting point for you if you're just getting started. And let me just begin by talking a little bit about why would you want to pursue this in the first place. And my own story here is I was very resistant to this. I think I actually had someone say to me, you should consider meditation. I probably had someone say that to me a dozen times over a period of years before I ever really brought myself to do it. And one of the reasons for that was that every time I did try to sit with myself and be quiet, I had in mind this idea that meditation is about clearing your mind. And yet when I sat down and tried to meditate, I felt like the opposite happened to me, that my mind was crowded with thoughts, feelings that I had not been acknowledging, that I had sort of been running away from. And so it felt like the exact opposite of relaxation to be sitting with myself, and my raging inner voice, was far from being quiet. It was getting louder and louder. And I found that very uncomfortable. So the few times that I tried it, I said, oh, I don't want to do this. This is not, I'm seeking peace and I'm getting the opposite. And, I think there was a really important insight for me there in my own journey, which is that, and I've shared with you my own feelings of, why did I begin this journey of personal development for myself, was that I was feeling out of alignment, and I couldn't really figure out why, but I just had this sense that there was more that I could give, that I could be across all areas of my life. And so I felt compelled to try to begin to make changes. And I came back to this advice that I'd gotten over the years and experience that I'd heard other people talking about how powerful meditation was for them. But I thought it wouldn't work for me. And I hope if you are someone who struggled with meditation, that you recognize some of the same challenges you have in my story, because as I talk to people about this in the coaching work that I do, I think it's actually quite common that folks, as meditation becomes a thing, across various traditions and cultures, it's in some cases it's been there for thousands of years, but increasingly you hear many more people talking about it. You may have thought it wasn't for you, and I hope that as we walk through this, you may get some insight into some ways, some on-ramps where this might work with you. But let me just finish my story about how I eventually did get to the place where I am now, where I spend probably 30 minutes a day in various forms of meditation, and why that's so valuable. The reason, by the way, if you had told me 3 years ago that I was going to spend a half hour every day doing certain of these practices I'm going to share with you, I would have said you're crazy. I would have said there's no way I will ever do that. And yet the reason I do it is, one, I find it now to be peaceful in the moment, which is great. But even more important, it is giving me the benefit that's really priceless in my life, which is really, I call it like the 0.2 of a second, meaning that in the moment when something is going on around me that might otherwise trigger me into an instinctive response or an instinctive reaction that I don't want, that is not my best self, I have that 0.2 of a second to instead pause and choose a thoughtful response that's aligned more with my best self. And I'm not going to tell you that every single time I have that 0.2 of a second, but that's what I'm playing for when I'm doing my meditation practice. I'm playing for that 0.2 of a second when I really need it. And so that is worth a half hour a day to me. That 0.2 of a second when I need it, I will spend a half an hour. Honestly, I would spend more time if I had to get it. And so my own story of how I kind of got to a place of finding meditation to be so valuable is that I actually, first of all, I began by trying kind of a traditional meditation of sitting, repeating a mantra, and And I just didn't find success with that. Instead, I had this experience of this voice in my head almost seemed to get louder. And what I ended up doing, my on-ramp, was actually progressive relaxation. And I'm going to run through this list and tell you what that is when we get to it. But that ended up working for me. And that allowed me then to kind of get into this in a way that worked for me and allowed me to build up other approaches. So I'll tell my story kind of woven throughout here. But let me just walk through what I want to cover with you in really just an overview. And then ultimately, there are specific techniques that are applicable for each of these things. And if you have interest in any one of these, I will try to mention additional resources to pursue. In some cases, it's a very simple technique and I can explain it right now. In other cases, it may be helpful to have a more detailed explanation, and I will try to post some more of those as we go on. But just to kind of give you the overview, the first one I've listed is called evening release meditation. And this is something I do every night. I do it for 10 minutes, but honestly, a starting point would be maybe even just 1 or 2 minutes. And this is something that what I'm going to explain is an approach that Brendon Burchard uses. I've adapted that or adopted that in my own practice. But it is basically sitting in a comfortable position. You could be sitting cross-legged as maybe a traditional image of meditation, but you could also just sit in a chair with both your feet on the floor and your hands resting, palm up comfortably in your lap. And it's just sitting quietly, paying attention to your breathing diaphragmatically. So you're breathing in and your belly comes out, in and out. And you're saying, as you breathe in and as you breathe out, a word. Brendon Burchard has recommended the word release. I find that to be great. You could say let go. You could say some other word. But it's basically the idea that you are releasing the day. You're releasing anything that you've been holding on to before you get ready for bed. And this is actually the last thing that I do pretty much before I go to bed. And there are times when I'm doing this where I will come close to falling asleep even as I'm doing it. And it's been phenomenal for me as a practice to just clear out the day, let go of it, so that if you happen to wake up in the middle of the night, you're not thinking about something, you're not still connected to what happened before. And so it's a great way if you're having trouble sleeping at night or sleeping through the night. This is something that as you build up your practice, you may find really helps with that. But I would also say, as with all these things, you want to have patience and grace with yourself, and don't expect that immediately this will change everything in your life. It's something you want to kind of ease your way into. And I would recommend, rather than trying to do 10 minutes at a time, just do a minute or two if this is something you're beginning. And by the way, that voice in your head will likely still be there. You're just repeating this word release, and you're not worried about, you notice your thoughts as they pass through your mind, but you don't hang on to them. And don't worry if that voice is loud, is yelling at you the whole time. A lot of times that voice in your head, you got to remember, it's not actually you. If you can hear it, you stand apart from it. You is something deeper than that voice. That voice is part of you, but it is not all of you. And you don't have to listen to it either. So that is your choice. And so it may be talking to you, maybe trying to kind of not let you let go, but just sit with it, let it be, and just continue saying that word release. So that's evening release meditation. Morning priming. I actually have a video on this up on already on the site. That's a specific routine. The one I do is about 10 minutes. I've adapted it from stuff that Tony Robbins does. There's we've talked about journaling and daily questions. There's an opportunity to ask yourself some great questions there. But that's basically a structured protocol to do sometime in the morning. You could do it right when you get out of bed, but it could be for many of you that you need to find a time that works. A lot of us have kids or other responsibilities first thing in the morning. And so just finding some time in the first, hour or so of your day when you could take 10 minutes and you can begin. I begin with my hands over my heart, thinking of things I'm grateful for. I have a little timer. I do 3 minutes of that. I then kind of open myself up to receive, in my case, as a person of faith, what I feel is, God's spirit coming into me. And then I spend about 3 minutes like this in prayer, basically channeling that energy out to specific people or situations that where I want to send blessings. And then I do what's called pranayamic breathing. It's rapid inhalation, exhalation, putting my arms over my head. That just really primes your system. And then I have a directive affirmation that I say to myself twice over that is really oriented around my vision of how I want to show up in the world. And that whole routine takes me 10 minutes. And that is just, I found, an amazing way to set up your day. And so that's a much more active form of meditation. At no point in that meditation am I trying to quiet the voice in my head. In fact, that voice in my head is not talking to me during that meditation because I'm busy. So that's when we get to quieting the voice in your head, that's a little trick there, that when you keep your mental faculties engaged, that voice does not have the opportunity to intrude. So another really important on-ramp, and actually where I started meditation in a way, is something called contemplative prayer. And depending on your faith tradition, you may already be familiar with some version of this. But this is a form of meditation, except that the mantra may be some words of faith that are significant to you in your faith tradition. And so again, you are not necessarily seeking to empty your mind. You're simply seeking to repeat these words of faith to yourself and sit quietly. And so you may find that this is actually a great way for you to kind of begin what amounts to meditation, but in some faith communities is not labeled that way. It's called a form of prayer. But my experience of it is that it is very much a meditation. So that's something to think about as well. Progressive relaxation. I mentioned this before. This has been really incredibly beneficial for me. And there are many techniques for this. This is something, if you just Google this term, you'll get a lot of guided meditations that are up on the web. But the idea is that you are relaxing your body progressively. So again, you can sit in that comfortable position, whatever that is for you. For me, I tend to sit in a chair like I am now, with my feet on the floor, my hands palm upwards, resting on my lap. And I actually tend to also, as I'm sitting quietly, I'll put my tongue resting against the roof of my mouth. And in some folks believe if you think about energy centers in your body, that is a way to sort of like wire yourself more positively. And I've found that to be helpful. But again, the idea here is that you're just closing your eyes and you're breathing diaphragmatically, meaning you're bringing oxygen in, you're letting your belly expand out, and just taking those deep, relaxing breaths. And as you do that, you begin to focus on each part of your body. I start with my toes and sort of move up from there, and just kind of acknowledge and appreciate whatever sensation you have in that part of your body. And then concentrate on releasing and letting go any tension that might be holding in that part of your body. And it's literally it's like a body scan where you're noticing and appreciating, not judging, just appreciating whatever feeling you may have in that part of your body. And then you're seeking to release it and let it go. And that whole process can take 15 or 20 minutes if you really sort of move methodically and slowly through all parts of your body. And it's almost like you're in an MRI. You're taking sort of slices, like, okay, now I've worked up to my knees, right? Sometimes I'll do one side of my body and then I'll come up the other side of my body. But the reason this was helpful for me as an on-ramp was that I wasn't trying to quiet the voice in my head. I was just concentrating on the parts of my body. The instruction here is not to clear your mind. It's just to focus on specific parts of your body, the sensation you feel there, and then letting it go. And you begin to notice often in doing this that there may be specific parts of your body where you are holding tension. I would find actually as I did this that I would sometimes get almost like an electric feeling right up here on this side of the base of my neck. It was like a little it's almost like there was like a little electrical low-level shock going on there. I still to this day don't know exactly what that was, but I also found that I was holding my anxiety, my fear in my stomach. And I really got in touch with that. And I realized that when I had begun trying to meditate previously, what I was really getting in touch with was my inner anxiety. And that I had been holding that for 20 years of my life. in my stomach, and I had been basically living my life in fear. Objectively, people might not have looked at me and realized that or seen that, but that was the truth. And through this technique of progressive relaxation, I followed a particular approach that a guy named Stephen Coe describes in his book, Your Hands Can Heal You. And Your Hands Can Heal You is a book about pranic healing or pranic energy. Some folks may think there's no scientific backing to it. I have no idea, but I can just tell you that my experience with that technique, I went to a training where someone was trained in that, and they were up on the stage and they did a demonstration of reaching out and going like this and having everyone in the audience hold their palms out. And you could feel as this guy was circling like this, you could feel that in your palms. And as I'm doing this right now, I can actually feel when I reverse direction, I can feel it's like there's energy moving around my palm, even though I'm not touching it. So I can't explain that, but I know what I feel. And I think in this whole arena of meditation, that's something to follow. And so I got this book, and there's, I think in chapter 3 of that book, Your Hands Can Heal You, there is this technique for a progressive relaxation meditation, which the author puts in the book so that you can let go of this tension and learn how to do pranic healing. I wasn't per se interested in pranic healing, but I was for darn sure interested in releasing that anxiety that I've been carrying for so long. And so I tried this technique. It was about a 20 minutes per night. I did it for about, I think it was like 27 days. And then I still can't fully account for it, but ever since, and this was about 2+ years ago, I have felt differently. I was able to let go of what I had been carrying around for 20+ years. And so, again, you can talk to other people about their experience. You need to try this stuff for yourself, but these are powerful tools. And so after I had done that, I then was able to meditate, and that inner voice, was not nearly, it's still there, but it felt much more benign to me because I had been able to release all that had built up for so long. This gets into this issue of quieting the voice in your head. And there are a couple other things that you can do there in addition to kind of releasing progressive relaxation. And one is just to recognize that, as I said before, that voice is not you, number one. So you don't have to listen to it. It's not in charge. You is something deeper. You stand apart. Your highest and best self, because it can hear that voice, is actually distinct from that voice. And that voice, for me, is often a voice of fear, anxiety. It can often be negative. And I've learned that I don't have to listen to it. And there are ways that I can distract it, and just as a great example, try counting backwards by 3s from 100 and see if that voice can keep up with you. It can't. It cannot talk to you while you're doing that. And that's kind of an indication of where that voice lives. That voice lives in your prefrontal cortex. It's your higher faculties kind of running rampant, disconnected from your deeper self. And so anytime you put a cognitive load on your brain, that voice actually does tend to quiet down. And so that's why so many of us run around so busy. We want to keep that cognitive load up so that we don't hear the voice. But that's exhausting because this part of our brain, our system 2, our higher faculties, are the most energy intensive tissue we have in our bodies. And so if you keep that switched on all the time just to overwhelm that inner voice, you are going to feel exhausted. And that's why many of us have also found other ways to do it. We've talked about flow, right? You drop into flow, that voice goes away, right? If you are, and you can drop into flow in a lot of different ways, including sports, nature, so anytime you can find a way to quiet that voice that builds your energy rather than drawing your energy down is a positive thing. And then the other piece is that if that voice is just chattering at you, you don't have to listen to it. So when you realize that you can control the volume to a degree, and by the way, once that voice realizes that you're not paying attention, miraculously, it stops yammering at you so much. So there's a really positive feedback loop there as well. Micro meditations. This is an idea of really just mindfulness throughout the day. One that I love is just 6 diaphragmatic breaths. So just in and out 6 times, even 3 or 4. there's some really interesting studies of our endocrine system and how it's connected to our breathing, and that even just pausing and taking 6 deep breaths like that can reset how you feel and how you're holding tension in your body. And so if you find yourself getting triggered, starting to feel anxious or upset, or something is high stakes going on right around you, try breathing into it. The people you're interacting with or the situation, no one else may even know you're doing it, but you in that moment are taking that moment of mindfulness and breathing, and you can shift your state just like that. Another great one that Brendan Burchard has is really around setting intentions. And I've talked to a number of you about this. Like when you walk through a doorway, you can actually pause for just a moment or two and set your intention about what energy you want to carry into that room. And just that moment of mindfulness can really shift your whole state when you enter that room. I have one that I love to do when I'm going into my home, which is really just I have a word that's associated with how I want to be with each of the members of my family. And I say that word, each of those words to myself, and then I walk through the door. So that's a micro meditation. Subconscious scribing. This one's kind of out there, but I actually have had tremendous benefit from this. I learned this one from my coach, Jeff Fort. And this is basically the idea that you could sit in front of a computer or with a journal, pose a question that you're wrestling with, and just sit with it and kind of relax your mind, and then just start writing whatever that internal voice is saying. So this is like kind of counterintuitive maybe, because we just talked about quieting that inner voice, but this is actually dialing into it. And what you have to sort of recognize about this is that maybe 60%, 70% of what that inner voice says will seem like nonsense. Some of it might even seem disturbing, but there will be some stuff that is straight from your subconscious onto the page when you do this. And it can really be striking after you do an exercise like this for 5 or 10 minutes, what you've written down. You may see as you sort of turn your system 2 brain back on and try to assess what you've written, you need to understand some of this, it's not for you, it's not relevant for this moment, you just let it go. But there may be other pieces and insights that come to you that you just wouldn't have gotten any other way. So that's one that maybe, I don't want to say it's a more advanced technique, but it's just something that you need to do with some care, because what comes out, you have to sift through it and determine what's really a message for me and my deepest self, and what is something that is not relevant and I can just set aside. Next is root cause analytic meditation. And this is a technique actually that the Dalai Lama, he has about 5 hours of meditation he does every day. And analytic meditation is really what he spends most of his time on. And this is also similar to the idea of, in cognitive behavioral therapy, of questioning your thoughts. And so you may have something that's troubling you. And as you meditate in this way, you ask yourself, what is it that's troubling me? How do I know that's true? How can I be sure? What would happen if that weren't true? What is this thought doing for me? How would things be different if I believed something different? So you're literally kind of questioning that. Byron Katie has a book called The Work, or it's called The Work of Byron Katie. And she has 4 questions that are very similar, that are really just kind of questioning, is this thought true? How do I know it's true? And it really can free you up to realize, like, hey, my thoughts might not be true. And if they're not true, new possibilities might open up for me. And I use the word root cause with this too, because it does help you get down to kind of what might be more essential and more of a driver of positivity in your life. Lastly is controlled breathing. And this is kind of an amazing area. Our autonomic nervous system, the part, our heartbeat, our endocrine system, all of these systems in our body that are outside our conscious control. There is one part of it that it's kind of amazing. It crosses that boundary, and that's our breathing. So when we're sleeping, when we're unconscious, our breathing happens without our thinking about it. But we can exercise conscious control over our breathing if we choose. And so many people and many traditions of meditation believe that breathing has a special power. It's like a gateway into regulating our physiology and parts of our physiology that aren't normally under our control. Some of you may have heard of Wim Hof, sometimes called the Iceman, and he's performed these remarkable feats of, running a marathon in the Arctic Circle barefoot. He's gone under the polar ice, set all kinds of world records. He's immersed himself in an ice bath for 90 minutes and come out no problem. He's not just sort of a remarkable individual, although he certainly is that. He has a set of breathing techniques. You can, again, Google this. You can learn about all of this online, that are quite remarkable. And I've tried them out for myself. And you can get yourself very quickly to a point of, basically, one of his techniques is around what seems like hyperventilation, but is actually kind of hyperoxygenation by rapidly breathing in and out in a powerful way, and then holding your breath. And if you put a pulse oximeter on your finger while you did this, you would see, you'd max out the oxygen. If you were a healthy individual, you'd max out the oxygen, and then you would watch your blood oxygen drop while you were holding your breath. And there's been some very interesting scientific studies about what this does. And a lot of this stuff has not been studied, but a bunch of his things have. And it appears to have some pretty remarkable effects. They actually did a study where people who were using his techniques were volunteers were infected with a common cold virus. And then they studied the immune response. They had a control group. And people who did this had a much stronger immune response. So there's a lot about this that isn't understood, but I think we would probably all agree that there's a whole lot going on inside our bodies that we're not sort of consciously in control of. And when you try various controlled breathing techniques, you're kind of opening up a world that can be quite remarkable. And I'll just say to you guys, that I've held my breath for 3.5 minutes this way without any exertion whatsoever and a totally normal pulse rate. I had no idea that that was even possible for me. And so, again, as with this experience, I'm following my own experience and just sharing with you that I found this to be extremely powerful. And I now incorporate this into part of my morning priming. A few safety tips. You have to do this like lying down in a safe place. And it's not for everybody. But I just want to share with you that there are these techniques out there. Some of them have been around for thousands of years, pranayamic breathing in yoga, for example. So again, the idea here is just to try out different things. If meditation is something that has been difficult for you or that you thought just wasn't for you, to realize that it has many different forms and that it allows you to access and build your energy. And if you can incorporate even one of these things in a small way into your daily routine, it's the kind of thing that pays compound interest and that it will just build on itself and you can benefit from it day after day. So I hope this has been a helpful overview and that you will find in this something to try out for yourself, whether you're just getting started or building on a practice that you already have. If you like this video and you want to access the worksheet or any other material that goes with it, just click the link below or head on over to joyfulimpact.co. That's the website where we have all the material we use for working with coaching and personal development for change agents. You can set up a free account in the members area, and you can also check out the blog where we have new content coming out all the time. Why are we putting all this out there for free? Because the world has never been more in need of a new, greatest generation of change agents. I hope this material is helpful to you, and if it is, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. That will help us spread the word.